Welcome to the Momentum Leaders webinar today. We are so honored to have as our guest Vitale Hardin. She will be leading us on overcoming perfectionism. I could go on and on about all of her credentials and how amazing she is. And we're so very blessed to have you here today and would love to welcome everyone. If y'all have any questions, please don't hesitate to put it into the chat. Make sure you're muted today. And I don't want to take away any more time from you, Vitale. I know you have a lot to offer us. So I'm going to go ahead and let you get started. Thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Darla. All right, everyone, I'm really excited to be here today and talk about overcoming perfectionism. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. It's the least important part of our content today, but just for a frame of reference. Born and raised in Huntsville, Alabama. I currently live in Kentucky. So love the home state of Alabama. And I also worked several years in Birmingham, Alabama. But most importantly, I want to talk about why perfectionism. So perfectionism is something that impacted my life deeply. In fact, for more than 3 decades of my life, perfectionism held me back. And what that looked like was a 10-year addiction to Adderall that started when I was 21 years old at the University of Georgia and continued until I was 31 years old. And no one knew that I was struggling with this addiction. And I thought that it allowed me to be perfect, right? I could work 28-hour days. I could be thin without trying. And I was, just climbing the corporate ladder in my career. And so on the outside, yes, I looked perfect, but I was dying on the inside. So almost 9 years ago, I decided to get sober, and that really changed my life. And I started to do a lot of work internally on what was really going on with me. And I realized that Adderall wasn't the issue for me. It was this addiction to perfection, which I actually wrote all about in my memoir called Addicted to Perfect. And so during the past 9 years, I started doing a lot of research around perfectionism. I started creating a lot of content around it. And it is one of the topics that I am most passionate about because it is the most pervasive, I would say, obstacle or issue that we as women and I would say as a society are really struggling with and our workplaces are struggling with. So today, we're going to take a look at our own perfectionism and how it's showing up. And then I'm going to give you the tools to let it go. So you all will officially be recovering perfectionists after our hour together. So there is relief at the end of this tunnel. And also everything that I'm talking about today, I have personally experienced or overcome. And so these aren't stories that I've heard or something that I've read in a book. These are tried and true techniques and content. And so you all are in good company. I'm here with you. All right, so let's start today with my favorite quote about perfectionism. And it's by Brene Brown. And it's that perfection is a 20-ton shield that we lug around thinking it will protect us when it's actually the thing that's preventing us from taking flight. So we've been sold this lie that perfectionism is the key to success, but it's actually what is limiting our success. And yes, we may have achieved a substantial amount of success on paper, right, in our career, whatever that looks like, under the guise of perfectionism. But when you can let go of your perfectionism and release it, anything is possible. And the sky is not the limit, it's just the beginning. So let's get straight on what I'm talking about when I talk about perfectionism. So a lot of people, when they think about perfection, they think of needing to have a perfectly organized house or a perfectly clean car. And you all, I'm talking about the deep roots of perfection, right? So perfection is typically a coping mechanism born in our childhood or our young adulthood. And so for me, also, I keep it very real in my webinars. So it's going to be an authentic hour. So for me, my perfectionism was born in my childhood. I was raised in a home with an alcoholic mother and 2 workaholic parents. And the only time I ever got love and attention was for my outside achievements, right? For my good grades or my extracurriculars or being on sports teams. And so I quickly learned at a young age that my worth was outside of myself, which is why I chased it for more than 3 decades, right? If I, make this amount of money, if I have this title, if I'm doing all these things, if I'm making everyone happy, then I'm worthy. And so that's what perfectionism is. It's actually when we are outsourcing our self-worth, our intuition, and our decision-making to people and places and things outside of ourselves, right? It's when we allow others to be the expert of us instead of us being the expert of us. And so when perfectionism is controlling our lives, and we may not know that, but when perfectionism is controlling our lives, we're actually just in the passenger seat of our life. And so when you can heal your perfectionism, which you're going to learn to in our hour together, you actually get the opportunity to step back into the CEO role of your life. So instead of perfectionism being the CEO of your life, you get to become the CEO of your life. And you also bring in-house that intuition, that trust making, that self-worth, you bring it back in-house. And so it depends on no one and nothing except for yourself, which makes you unshakable. So it's an incredible journey. Now, and this is also just another graphic of kind of what it looks like, right? So perfectionism is when we allow internal and external pressures to define us, right? Our to-do list, the amount of money we make, what we weigh, what we look like, the house that we have, all of those things outside of ourselves. So I also want to talk about the data around perfectionism. So a few years ago, I hired the University of Northern Colorado to conduct a national research study for me on the impact of perfectionism in the workplace, because I knew it was an issue, but I wanted the data to prove that was an issue. And I'm actually about to do the study over again in February. So I'm going to have comparison data. So we can send that out if you're into research like me. So what the data showed is that 92% of people struggle with some form of perfectionism. So it might be mild perfectionism, or if it was in my case, it was extreme perfectionism. 86% of our workplaces have cultures of perfectionism. And these aren't intentional cultures of perfectionism, but they are cultures of perfectionism. And a third of our workforce is thinking of leaving because of perfectionism in the workplace. So as we're thinking about the war on talent and, retaining our workforce, we really need to look at the perfectionism that's existing in our workplace, which I do additional content about today. Today, we're focusing on ourselves. So here's also some other data as it pertains to us individually as leaders. So perfectionism impacts our ability to be productive by 61%. It impacts our confidence by 62%. It impacts our relationship building in the workplace, but also outside of the workplace by 72%. And it impacts our ability to be innovative and creative by 66%. And right, it's so important to be able to come up with new solutions and creative ideas. And so it's holding us back. I also get a lot of questions because when I'm talking about this perfectionism stuff, a lot of people are like, oh, that's a woman thing. That's not about me. And so I actually pulled the data between those that identify as male and those that identify as female. And according to the study, men actually rated higher on perfectionism than women. Not much higher, but higher on every single question. So what that means is that perfectionism is not a gender thing. It is a human thing. It may show up differently based on gender, but it is a human thing. All right, so let's talk about how it's showing up for us. So here are some of the symptoms of perfectionism. And if you feel personally attacked by this slide, I just want to let you know that you are in good company. You are not alone, and we can let all of this stuff go. I also just want to remind you for our time together today to put aside your shame and your judgment and your self-blame, because we can't heal the parts of ourselves that we hate. And as perfectionists, we're very critical of ourselves. And so the more you can let go of that self-criticism for the next hour and really identify with the pieces of perfectionism that resonate with you, the more you're going to be able to let it go again and step back into that CEO role of your life. All right, so let's go down the symptoms. People pleasing is a major symptom of perfectionism. I need you to be happy for me to be happy. Avoiding conflict, right? We don't have those difficult conversations with our loved ones or colleagues because what if I upset someone? What if they don't like me? What if I get rejected? We have unrealistic expectations of ourselves. And then oftentimes these unrealistic expectations then get projected onto our team members and those around us, right? So I used to lead the marketing and business development departments of large law firms. And I had unrealistic expectations of myself, and I projected that onto my team. Now we were achieving all the metrics, all of our goals, but we were burnout. It was a really unhealthy environment. And I just wasn't aware that perfectionism was controlling how I led. Procrastination is a major symptom of perfectionism. So we're so afraid that when we start that project, it's not going to be perfect enough. So instead, we carry around anxiety for 2 or 3 weeks about starting that project instead of just sitting down and getting it started. Approval seeking, low self-worth, imposter syndrome, a huge symptom, right? We're in a meeting and we don't share our brilliant ideas because we're so afraid of judgment, or maybe that's a dumb idea. Maybe someone else has already thought of that. So we actually hold back our growth and hold back our brilliance just because of this fear, right? Of not being perfect, not being enough. The need for control. This is what I'm still working on a daily basis, especially when it comes to parenting. But the need for control is a major symptom of perfectionism, needing everything to go the way that we think things should go. Comparison. So constantly comparing ourselves to other people. I should be further along and she has that and he has this. And then indecision is another symptom of perfectionism. Right. So we might go back and forth on a decision, or when we've made a decision, we're like, oh, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. Right. So we really question our decision making because, again, we've been outsourcing that for so long. So these are some of the main symptoms of perfectionism. Now, what are some ways that it actually kind of shows up in our career? And I'll also talk about how it shows up in our lives. So in our career, it can show up. These are just some examples of, that constant like overcommitting to everything, the chronic multitasking, the hurry syndrome. The hurry syndrome really shows up in my personal life with my child. It's in the mornings, we're getting ready for school and I'm like, hurry up, get in the car, let's go. Like constantly being in a hurry more often than not, for no reason. Those unrealistic expectations, we talked about imposter syndrome, and at the bottom of the slide says destructive self-criticism. This is a big one. So I want you to think about the last time you sent an email to the leadership team, and after you hit send, there was a typo. All right, there was a typo in the email, and now you're reeling. Right? They're going to think I'm incompetent. I'm definitely not going to get that year-end bonus. I'm not going to get that promotion. I can't believe I did that. We get in our heads and we go on and on and on over a typo, right? The world is moving fast. We are human. But again, that destructive self-criticism that comes with something really small can really consume our day and even consume several days if you were anything like me. Also, it's when we set people-pleasing deadlines instead of realistic deadlines. So I want you to think about the last time you were in a meeting and they were like, oh, Vitale, when can you get that to me by? And I'm like, oh, I can get it to you by end of day tomorrow. And I know good and well that I'm going to have to pull an all-nighter to get that done by end of day tomorrow. I know that I'm going to have to put 5 other projects aside, and I'm going to be, just the level of anxiety I'm going to have for the next 24, 36 hours is going to be insane, when I could have just paused and said, hey, realistically, I can get that to you by Monday. But if you want me to shift some priorities, I can get it to you by whatever date. But we're so afraid of not being perfect enough or appearing that we can't handle everything. So we put all the burden and stress on ourselves. It's when our career is our identity, or we over-identify with our career, right? A lot of workaholism exists in perfectionism. And it's also when we take on too many projects and feel burnout. As perfectionists, everyone gives us the projects. We're the yes people, we get things done, but we're never advocating for ourselves. And also we're afraid that if I say no to that one project, will I become irrelevant? Right? Will I get passed up for the next project? So it's actually sort of a subtle form of control, right? Always saying yes. So these are some of the ways that it shows up in your career. Now, we know if it's showing up in our career, it's showing up in our personal life. So what are some of the ways that it shows up in our personal life? It's when we're always doing for others and we're the last on our list of priorities, or maybe we're not even on our list of priorities, right? We haven't even made the cut. It's when we struggle being able to make decisions for ourselves, or when we set goals in our personal life and we don't take action, right? We've been wanting to take that Disney vacation with our family for 4 years, but we haven't even started planning. We've been wanting to do that kitchen renovation for the past 3.5 years, but no movement has been made on it. We put our own goals on the back burner, and yet we put everyone else's goals on the front burner. It's when we lack healthy boundaries in relationships. Right, so a lot of codependency exists in perfectionism. I need you to be happy for me to be happy. It's also when we don't speak up for our needs in relationships, right? We don't set boundaries. We don't want to tell our loved ones how we really feel, because what if we upset them? What if they abandon us? What if we get rejected? And then the word should is always a sign, you all, that we are in perfectionism mode, right? I should be doing this. I shouldn't be doing that. And it's like, says who, right? Those unrealistic expectations. So these are some ways that they're showing up. Now, that was a lot of intense information, so let's all have a laugh now. This is a graphic that shows the difference between living in perfectionism and living in excellence. So most of my work is teaching leaders how to lead with excellence instead of leading with perfectionism. But this is just a graphic, and I'm going to hit play again because it makes me smile. But you all, I would say for probably 36 years of my life, I was living in the car on the left, stressed, anxious, just driven by perfectionism. Perfectionism was most definitely the CEO of my life. And now I spend 85% of my life with Kermit. So that's really the goal, not 100%, but if we can spend 85% of our lives with Kermit, then we're good. And I'm going to give you all the tools to do that today. Also, one thing that's really important to note is that whatever car we are in, whether it's the car on the left or the right, it is the car that everyone else in our lives is experiencing and riding in. Right? It's the car that our kids are experiencing, our loved ones are experiencing, our colleagues, our team members are experiencing. So when we can heal this perfectionism, we indirectly heal those all around us. So it's really, really powerful. All right, so now let's talk about how to identify it within ourselves and overcome it and let it go. So today we're going to go through a 3-step process for overcoming perfectionism. So we're going to start with awareness. We're going to move on to mindset tools to start shifting from a mindset of perfectionism to a mindset of excellence. And then I'm going to give you the quick action 2-step formula for letting all this go. Again, you all are officially recovering perfectionists. All right, so we start with awareness, We start with awareness because, I'm having a hard time with this. We start with awareness because you can't change what you're not aware of. So many of you may have come to this webinar today and you're like, maybe perfectionism is a thing for me. Actually, I know like 5 perfectionists. So if I attend this, then I can help them. And then you looked at that list of symptoms and you had 10 of 12 of those symptoms. And you're like, okay, maybe perfectionism is a thing for me, right? So we didn't know until we're aware. So we're going to start awareness with an exercise that I like to call pattern identification. And this is about looking at our own particular perfectionism patterns and how perfectionism is showing up in our lives and in what areas of our lives. So what I've done for you all is I've created 2 types of perfectionism. It's just a really easy way to think of perfectionism. There is slow perfectionism and there is fast perfectionism. Slow perfectionism is the kind of perfectionism that keeps you stuck, right? So I'm talking about procrastination, imposter syndrome, right? You're not speaking up, you're not sharing your brilliance, that avoidance of conflict, you're not delegating in the workplace, that indecision. So this is the kind of perfectionism that keeps you stuck. On the other end of the spectrum is fast perfectionism. So fast perfectionism is the unrealistic expectations, the people-pleasing, approval seeking, the chronic multitasking, that need for control, the work harder workaholism. So it shows up in different ways in our lives. One thing that's really interesting to note, you all, is that when it comes to our own goals, we are typically slow perfectionists. When it comes to other people's goals, we're typically fast perfectionists, right? We'll jump through hoops for other people all day. But when it comes to our own goals, we put ourselves again on the back burner. Now, as I'm talking through this, some of you may identify more with slow. Some of you may identify more with fast, or if you're anything like me, you're a hybrid, right? So I've got a little bit of both from every single column. And also sometimes, like I hear a lot that people feel like they're slower in their personal lives and they're faster in their professional lives. Again, doing for ourselves, doing for others. So now what I want to do is give you some examples of how slow and fast perfectionism shows up in your lives. And I want you to do a reflection exercise, like how is it showing up for me? And then we can also talk in the chat or also talk as a group if we're feeling crazy today. All right, so how does it show up in our lives? So in our career, we've already really talked about this a lot. So just to cover it briefly, slow perfectionism in our career is when we're procrastinating, right? That imposter syndrome, we're not delegating. Fast perfectionism in our careers, and we're constantly saying yes, that workaholism, the people pleasing, those unrealistic expectations. In our relationships, slow perfectionism is not setting boundaries, right? Not having those difficult conversations, avoiding that. Fast perfectionism in our relationships is when we are, hosting all the baby showers, all the parties, saying yes to everything, doing all the things. We're the yes woman. In our Or health and self-care. Slow perfectionism is when we over-identify with our body image, right? Or how we look and appear. So an example of slow perfectionism in our health and self-care is when we're at the pool with our kids or with friends and we stay in our cover-up instead of getting in the pool and making a memory. So we actually miss out on life because we have so much fear of judgment of how we look. So we miss out on memory making. Fast perfectionism, when it comes to our health and self-care, is when we had that piece of cheesecake last night. So now we need to do like an OTF, Orange Theory workout every single day for the next 3 weeks, right? We got to punish ourselves for having that piece of cheesecake. Again, all the examples that I'm giving you, I have experienced personally. Finances. Slow perfectionism with our finances, you all, is when we look at our finances like this. We don't want to look at our money. We don't want to talk about our money. We definitely don't want to check the bills. Budgeting's not even a word we talk about in our house. We just avoid our money. Fast perfectionism with our finances is when we're constantly spending, right? We need these material things to fill this void or to feel better. When it comes to personal development, slow perfectionism is when we've had that business card of that therapist for 3 months now and have yet to schedule that appointment. Or we have a book on our bedside table and it's been collecting dust for the past 6 months. Fast perfectionism with our personal development is when we have 2 coaches, 5 therapists, 2 online courses, and we're really just trying to perfect who we are because we'll never be enough. Again, all examples that I've experienced. With family and parenting, slow perfectionism is the example of that Disney vacation, right? We've been talking about the Disney vacation, but we've made no movement on it. We haven't set dates. We haven't started to budget. We're really just kind of putting things on hold. Fast perfectionism with our family and parenting is when our kids are in 20 different sports. We're on the PTO, the PTA. We get home at 10:30 p.m. and we finally have like 30 minutes, not really even 30 minutes to breathe because we are overcommitted to so many things. And same thing with fun and enjoyment, right? Those extremes. Slow perfectionism is really not having any fun in our lives, right? Work is a priority, our to-do list is a priority, and then same thing with fast perfectionism. So I'd love in the chat box, or even if we've got some brave women on this call that want to share and unmute themselves. Are you slow? Are you fast? Are you both? So we can use the chat box. Also, it'd be awesome if anyone wants to unmute and share. We're all in a safe space.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. I couldn't get my video, but as long as you can hear me, that'll work.
Yeah.
I think for me, I am the fast perfectionist, but I'm going through empty nesting. So all the responsibilities now, I feel like I'm slow. So I made the transition, but that's not good either. So yeah, I understand what it is to be the worker, 10 hours, go home, you got band practice, wrestling, whatever else, school projects, when they have to do reports and all that stuff. So yeah, I truly understand that. And now I think I'm in a space where I was so used to that. Now it's like I feel a little lost because things have slowed down as far as family life because they're adults now.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that, Mildred. And perfectionism shows up differently in the different season of our lives, right? So perfectionism may have presented differently when we were single versus married versus building and creating a family versus different levels of our career, right? So it just shifts based on the season of our life as well. So I'm glad that you brought that up. All right. So now we've identified the slow and fast, and thank you all for all the comments. I'm loving it. Slow and fast, mostly slow, mostly fast. So thank you all for contributing. Now let's talk about how to let this stuff go. So we're going to move on to mindset, right? Mindset is so important, especially if we are stepping back into the CEO role of our lives. We've got to be the CEO of our mindset, right? Because our thoughts create our reality. And so we've got to be really intentional with our thoughts, especially when we want to shift out of perfectionism. So I'm going to teach a bunch of tools, but I also just want to mention that perfectionism, you all, cannot coexist with love and compassion, right? They cannot coexist. And so the kinder that we are to ourselves, the less oxygen perfectionism has in our lives. But here's the thing, a lot of us have been punishing ourselves to success, right? With these 10, 12-hour days, with this overcommitment, with the workaholism, we've been punishing ourselves. And that's maybe the only way that we know. That was the case for me until I realized there was another better way. And so I'm going to teach you all tangible tools to make compassion a tangible tool that you can use to, again, let perfectionism have less impact in your lives. So I'm going to teach you all 3 different tools today. And you don't need to use all of them. We don't need to perfect this. Just use the ones that resonate with you. So there's a tool called the 4 C's that I'm going to talk to you about. We're going to talk about some reframing tools and how to reframe your mindset from perfection to excellence. And then I'm going to give you my top mantras for overcoming perfectionism. So the 4 C's are a really powerful tool because a lot of people come to me and they're like, Vitale, I got in that perfectionism cyclone of thoughts and I wasn't able to recognize that I was in it, right? Because again, if you're like me, you were doing it for like 36 years. And so it's not going to just come naturally that I'm going to notice that I'm berating myself over a typo in an email. And so the 4 C's are a way to radically disrupt that perfectionism cyclone, right? Those intrusive thoughts that happen as a result of our perfectionism. So I'm going to tell you the 4 C's, and then I'm also going to tell you how to implement them in your life. So the 4 C's are criticism, curiosity, compassion, and choice. So this is something that you'll actually start taking your intrusive perfectionist thoughts through. So let me give you an example of how you would process this. Right, so you want to notice your criticism, the first C. So let's take the example of the typo that we sent from the email that we sent to the leadership team, right? We're reeling, I can't believe I did that. I'm so incompetent. I'm definitely not going to get that year-end bonus. I'm not going to get that promotion. We go on and on. So I want you to notice the criticism. Then I want you to get curious, the second C, and ask yourself, why am I being so hard on myself over a typo in an email? Then I want to move to the third C of compassion. You know what? Of course, I'm being hard on myself. How the leadership team views me is really important. How I perform in my career is really important to me. Feeling successful in my career and as a leader is really important to me. So of course, I'm being hard on myself. And then move to the 4th C of choice, right? Choose something better. Instead of staying stuck and being hard on yourself for the rest of the day, say, you know what? I give myself room to be human. I'm moving on. I've got other things to do today. I do not have time to beat myself up over this email. The important thing to note is that perfectionism gets us out of our hearts and into our heads. And so when we are in our heads, we only stay in that first C of criticism. We just stay stuck in that first C. And the power occurs when we can move down those 4 C's and make a different and better and more productive choice for ourselves, right? That's us being the CEO. When perfectionism is the CEO, we stay stuck in that first C of criticism. So it's really important to move down the 4 C's. All right, so how do you practice this? Now, a lot of people are like, Vitale, that sounds awkward, but if you want a different life, you got to do something different. So what I suggest is for 2 weeks, so I'm talking 14 consecutive days, I want you to take a 10-minute break in the middle of your day. So noon, 1 p.m., 2 p.m. So take a 10-minute break in the middle of your day. And I want you to sit down and I want you to think about 2 intrusive thoughts that you had earlier that day. Right? 1 or 2 intrusive thoughts. So I want you to think about, maybe it was that you're really short with your kids in the morning when you were leaving for work. Maybe it was something you said on a Zoom meeting for work. Maybe it was what you said to yourself when you looked at yourself in the mirror that morning. So I just want you to think about what are, 1 or 2 intrusive thoughts. And then I want you to process them and write them and process them through the 4 C's. We want to write them down because it rewires your brain, right? When we write something down. What this process allows you to do is it allows you to course correct the second half of your day. Because otherwise, if we are not taking note of these intrusive thoughts and changing them, then it snowballs, right? Our perfectionism snowballs and then we go to bed with it. Subconsciously, we wake up The snowball continues to grow, right? Day after day, week after week. Again, 36 years, the snowball was really large. I don't even know if you could call it a snowball for me. But this tool allows you to tangibly start course correcting your thoughts. After you do it for 2 weeks, you all will start automatically shifting it in your mindset. So if you love this tool, then feel free to continue to journal and use it. But after 2 weeks, you'll start shifting in your mindset immediately from perfection to excellence. So it's a really powerful way to form a new habit and let go of your perfectionism, the 4 C's. All right, so now let's move on to the second set of tools, reframing. So one of my favorite quotes is by Wayne Dyer, and it's, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, right? If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And if we're stepping back into the CEO role of our lives, we have the power of how we perceive things, right? Is the glass half full, half empty, or is it overflowing? And so that's the power is within us. So I want to give you all some tools to start shifting your mindset from one of perfection to excellence. So the first reframing tool is going from what if thinking to even if thinking, right? So what if thinking is very problem-based, it's perfection-based, right? So it's, what if my son doesn't make the soccer team? And, what if that team member quits? And what if we don't make that huge deadline? What if? And we think that we can what if ourselves to an answer. And it creates a lot of anxiety. If you're anything like me, you were born with anxiety, and my anxiety I feel in my chest. And so when I'm what ifing, I can feel that anxiety in my chest. But when I switch to even if, my anxiety diminishes. So I want you to switch from what if to even if. So even if my son doesn't make the soccer team, you know what? There's going to be another opportunity. Even if that team member quits, it gives us an opportunity as a team to come together and re-envision the role. It also gives us an opportunity to attract a more aligned team member. Even if we don't make that huge deadline, you know what? It gives us a chance to come together as a team and brainstorm our approach and do some evaluation and come up with a new approach to move forward. Even if it's going to be okay. What happens is what if is very problem-based. So when we stay stuck in what if, again, we stay stuck in our heads and we stay stuck in the problem. And as leaders, it's not helpful. We need to move to the solution. And so even if allows us to move to a solution because it clears all that anxiety that we've got when we're trying to what if ourselves to an answer. So even if reduces that anxiety and gives us the opportunity for a solution to be presented and to make itself clear to us. So what if to even if. The next tool is going from balance to priorities. So you all have my permission to throw out the word balance. It is one of my least favorite words. The term work-life balance for me is like nails on a chalkboard. The reason there are 1,400 workshops on how to solve work-life balance is because there is no solution. Because work-life balance and the construct of balance is a setup for failure. Because balance is implying, you all, that every area of our lives gets equal attention 24/7, 365, right? Our self-care, our health, our partnering, our parenting, our profession, all get equal attention 24/7, 365. It also is distracting, right? We're never where our feet are. We're at work and we feel guilty because we're not with our families. We're with our families and we feel guilty that we're not working. Right? So we're never where our feet are. And you all, life is lived in the moment and where our feet are. So it's so important. So I want you all to throw away this idea of balance, right? This setup for failure. And I want you to think about your life in terms of priorities. Priorities allow us to be where our feet are. They allow us to change and evolve. There's no change and flexibility with balance because everything gets equal attention. But with priorities, we're allowed to change and evolve, right? From morning to day and day to day and morning to afternoon. And so I want you to think about your life in terms of priorities. The one caveat is that priorities require a little pre-planning. So what I do every Sunday, I spend 30 to 45 minutes with my calendar and my schedule, and I write my schedule down, right? I'm old school, so I use my phone, but I like to see my week laid out in front of me, and I write it down, all the hard meetings, everything going on. And then what I do is I start prioritizing. So last week, for example, I had 3 proposals for potential clients due on Wednesday, which I knew meant I was going to be working really late on Tuesday night. So I told my son and my husband, I'm like, don't expect a whole lot from me. I am working on Tuesday night. Figure it out for yourselves. Hunger Games 2023, figure it out. And then I knew on the weekend, I had a soccer tournament and date night with my husband. And as a business owner, I typically work on the weekends. I'm still working on that workaholism thing, you all. Again, all these pieces, we don't want them to control our lives anymore. But anyway, so I was prioritizing that this weekend or last weekend, I was going to have the soccer tournament and I was going to have my date night, and I was not going to hold myself to these unrealistic expectations that I'm going to work. And that was my priority. And it allowed me to be where I was, right? I was able to get all those proposals done Tuesday night because I wasn't feeling guilty about it. And I was able to be really present with my son and my husband because that was my priority. Now, again, it's not perfect. There are pieces of guilt that will show up for us, but it doesn't have to run your life. So I just want you to think about your life in priorities versus balance. And if you like the term work-life balance, maybe sub the word boundaries instead of balance, right? Work-life boundaries instead of balance. Now, another set of tools is going from limiting language to empowering language. So there are 3 words, you all, that I'm going to encourage you to throw out of your vocabulary as well. And they are overwhelmed, exhausted, and busy, right? Those words that we use, overwhelmed, exhausted, and busy, we overuse them. And when we say that we're overwhelmed, guess what our life feels like? It feels overwhelming. Or when we say we're exhausted, we feel exhausted. For me, when I feel exhausted, it's a sign that I need to prioritize better. And then the word busy, we overuse it, right? It's like we're saying we're a victim to our schedule. So a word that you can use, or a term that you can use instead of busy that I use, and I think it's fun, I use a term highly scheduled. So instead of saying I'm busy, I say I'm highly scheduled, which makes me feel really popular because I'm in charge of my schedule and there's lots of things on my calendar. So feel free to use that and say that you're highly scheduled instead of busy. And also just think about the language that you're using in general, right? Do we always say we have to do something, like I have to take my son to soccer practice? Or are we saying I get to take my son to soccer practice? Right? Is it I can't do this, or I can't afford that? Or is it, you know what, I'm choosing to spend my money on something else? So just really reflect on the language that you use. Is it language that's empowering you, or is it more limiting language or victim language? So just something to think about. And then the last reframing tool, which is one of the most profound, or has had the most profound impact on my life, but it's gratitude. And we hear a lot about gratitude. We see it on Instagram, on social media, but I have practiced gratitude for the past 6 years, 85% of the time, right? We're not going for perfection. So 85% of the time I practice gratitude every morning, and it has really shifted my relationships, how I work, how I build my business, how I parent, all of those things, because what you appreciate in life appreciates. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people come to me and they're like, Vitale, I tried that gratitude journaling thing and I got really bored after 7 days and I quit doing it. So again, if you're writing the same list over and over again, I would get bored too. And you have my permission to not write that gratitude list anymore. But I want you to consider a different way of gratitude journaling. And this allows you to really feel into gratitude and practice it in a different way. So the way I practice it is called past, present, and future gratitude journaling. So what I mean by that is every morning, 85% of the time, I sit down and I journal and I think, okay, past gratitude. What happened yesterday that I'm really grateful for? Did I finally have that difficult conversation I've been needing to have? Did I have a really sweet interaction with my son? Did I do my workout in the morning? What happened yesterday that I'm really grateful for? Did I get a compliment? I mean, the little things and the big things, you all. So past gratitude. Then I want you to think about present gratitude. What's happening in this present moment that you're really grateful for? And that's where that bulleted list can come in, right? My health, my family, my career, whatever it is that you're grateful for. You can also say that you're grateful that you've got some silent time in the morning just to yourself. No one's saying mom, no one's calling your name. You just got some time to yourself. I write that down sometimes too, right? Time just for me. Then I want you to think about future gratitude. What's happening later today, tomorrow, next week, this summer? What are the things that you're grateful for? You all are on my gratitude journal from this morning. I was like, I cannot wait to meet all these incredible women from Momentum and teach them how to overcome perfectionism. So again, it just allows you to feel into gratitude a little differently, and also serves as a journal of your life. So it's like two birds, one stone, right? Because I oftentimes can go back and look through my journals, especially the past journal part. And it's also a kind of a reflection of my life. So it serves that purpose as well. So past, present, future. Now I want to share with you, let's move on to the final mindset tool, mantras. Mantras are another word for affirmations. I just prefer the word mantras. And mantras are statements that help you feel grounded when we don't feel grounded. And as perfectionists, we easily don't feel grounded because we always want to be in control. So these statements allow us to come back into our body. So I'm going to share with you all my top 4. I've got a bigger list. If you're interested, I can send that out, and Darla can send it out to you all. But these are my top 4 mantras for overcoming perfectionism. The first is, I give myself room to be human. Right? I give myself room to be human. All right. So you sent that email and there was a typo in it. I give myself room to be human. The coolest thing about this mantra is that when you give yourself permission to be human, you give everyone around you permission to be human too. This mantra has dramatically changed the relationship I have with my son. So instead of expecting him to show up as who I think he should show up as, I allow him to show up as himself 85% of the time. So I give myself room to be human. The second mantra is done is better than perfect. And I'm not talking about sacrificing work quality, you all. I'm talking about just getting started, right? Draft that email, draft that proposal, start that project, make that call, schedule that meeting. Done is better than perfect. This was my mantra for when I was writing my memoir, Addicted to Perfect, because I knew that if I stayed stuck in my perfectionist ways, I was never going to write my book. And so done is better than perfect. The third mantra, I cannot miss out on what's meant for me. This might be my all-time favorite, but this goes for every single one of you. You cannot miss out on what's meant for you. It's not possible. What's yours is yours. What happens is perfectionism slows us down to our doors of opportunity. Right? My doors of opportunity are not Darla's doors of opportunity, and Darla's doors of opportunity are not mine. We each have our own unique path, but we get caught up in everyone else's. And so I just want to remind you all that you cannot miss out on what's meant for you. So if you made an offer on that house and the offer wasn't accepted, it's not because you didn't make a good enough offer. It's because it's not your house, right? And a better one is on the way. If you applied for that job or applied for that promotion and you didn't get it, it is not because you aren't good enough or you didn't do a good enough job. It's because it's not meant for you and something better is on the way. I promise you. So just trust you can't miss out on what's meant for you. And then finally, action leads to confidence, which leads to action. As I said earlier in the research and the statistics, right? Perfectionism erodes our confidence by 62%. And confidence is one of the most important things as leaders, as parents, in every single role that we play in our lives. But confidence isn't built through thinking, it's built through doing. And so every time you take an action, you build your self-confidence, which then leads you to take more action, right? That momentum toward action and then more confidence. So whenever I'm on the fence about procrastinating, I really think to myself and I'm like, do I want to feel better about myself or worse? Right? As a CEO of my life, I have that control. Do I want to feel better about myself or worse? I want to feel better. So I'm going to take that action. So action leads to confidence, which leads to action. So we talked about 3 tangible ways to shift your mindset. We talked about the 4 C's. We talked about reframing tools, and then we talked about mantras. So I'd love to hear someone, if you want to unmute yourself or also in the chat box, I'd love to hear what your favorite mindset tools were before we move on to our final step of action. So Lynn, yeah, you shared done is better than perfect. Number 4, Molly, yeah, action leads to confidence, which leads to action. But I would love to hear anyone wants to include in the chat box. Yep, reframing. If anyone wants to share and unmute themselves, let's do that too. But yeah, the 4 C's. So again, you don't need to use all of these tools. Just use the ones that resonate with you, or the one that resonates with you, and take action on it. All right, so now let's move on to action, our third and final step, how you release this finally and let go of it. And what I want you to really think about is, for us to make, as humans, for us to make sustainable change, we've really got to emotionally connect, right? We've got to emotionally connect with our reason and our need to change, right? We got to emotionally connect with why we need to finally let go of this perfectionism and why it's no longer serving us. So I want you all to reflect, and I want you to think, like, what is your perfectionism costing you? Like, truly, what is it costing you? Is it costing you your emotional health, your relationships, your physical health, your peace, your joy, going for all the opportunities that you're worthy of and you're deserving of? Like, what is it actually costing you? So take a few minutes to write it down. And I would love if we could have some conversation around this too. I'd love to hear a few people unmute themselves. If we've got some brave women on this call that want to unmute themselves and just share, like, what is your perfectionism costing you? Anyone want to be our brave sharer?
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, I would say lack of sleep,
Yep.
because I'm
Yes.
so focused on trying to get everything done that day.
Right. So your physical health, yeah, costing you your physical health. So I want you to really connect you all with what your perfectionism is costing you. And now I'm going to teach you the easiest 2-step formula for letting it go. So it doesn't have to be complicated. It's simple, which doesn't mean it's easy, but there's a 2-step plan for releasing your perfectionism. So the 2 steps are inventory and detox. So I'm going to give you several examples and tell you how to apply this. So I would say 7 years ago, I was really trying to think of, like, how do you let go of perfectionism? How do you keep it simple? And I was looking at my own perfectionism patterns. And one of the patterns that I really wanted to let go of was my constant need for external validation. Asking people for advice on projects at work, really just in a need for, validation for how I was doing, and constantly asking people for advice instead of seeking advice from myself. And so the first step is to do a week-long inventory. So that's the first step. Step 1 is you do a week-long inventory of whichever perfectionism pattern you want to let go of. Now, all of us, I'm sure on this call, have a list of those perfectionism patterns. We want all of them to be gone in the next 13 minutes when this call is over, right? But that's not how it works. We are humans and we are evolving. So I want you all to just take one of the patterns that really stand out to you. It could be your people pleasing. It could be procrastination. So I really want you to just take one. So for me, it was this constant external validation and advice seeking. So the step 1 is taking a week-long inventory. And what I mean by that is I want you to use the notes section of your phone, and feel free to write it down, but we all have our phones with us 24/7. So it's helpful to use the phone. And so I do the notes section on my phone, and I want you to do an inventory every time you people please, or you almost people pleased, every time you procrastinated. For me, it was every time I was seeking advice, I would write it down. And what the inventory allows for you to do is just get really clear on how much it's impacting your life, right? It just gives you a lot of clarity. Then after we've done the week-long inventory, we move into the big times and we do a 2-week detox, which means you're going to detox from that pattern for 2 weeks. So in my case of the advice seeking and the external validation, I did not allow myself to ask for advice from anyone on anything for 2 weeks. It was a really scary 2 weeks, I'm not going to lie, but it really rid me of that habit of constantly asking for advice. And I would say where it was consuming 90% of my life, it now shows up maybe 10% of the time. So a huge shift. So again, we start with an inventory for 1 week, and then we do the detox. We can't just jump into the detox because it's a setup for failure, right? We need to do the inventory and then slowly move into the detox. So let me give you some examples of how you can do this. All right, so for people pleasing, if that's the area that you want to work on, obviously do the inventory, but for the detox, I want you to, instead of just saying no to everything, I want you to pause from saying yes during the 2 weeks, right? Just practice the pause. Right? We don't need to respond to that text message immediately. And if someone asks us our plans or, hey, can we do this? We can just respond with, hey, let me check my calendar and get back to you, which again, can be scary for us chronic people pleasers. But for 2 weeks, I want you to pause from saying yes. If external validation, like me, is something that you want to work on, then we're going to go straight full in and we're not going to ask for advice or input for 2 weeks. With imposter syndrome, this is something that you're really struggling with. For 2 weeks after you do the inventory for the detox, you're not allowed to dim your light for 2 weeks and beyond that, obviously, but during the detox, no dimming of your light. So that means when you're in that meeting and you're really afraid to share that brilliant idea of yours, you're going to share it. You're going to do it scared. Procrastination, if that's the one you're working on, instead of no procrastinating for 2 weeks, what I want you to do is really work on that procrastination on a day-by-day basis, right? So, because if you look at it for 2 weeks, it can seem overwhelming. And I want you to practice it for 2 weeks, but I want you to think about it in day-long increments, right? So this one project, I promised myself I'm not going to procrastinate on. Another example that's not on this list is, let's say you've got a lot of negative self-talk, and that's what you want to work on. So the inventory that you will do is you'll take an inventory of your negative self-talk, and the detox that you will do is you'll actually practice the 4 C's during that week, because we don't go from no negative from a lot of negative self-talk to no negative self-talk. There is a bridge, and the 4 C's are that bridge that help us get over the hump to no negative self-talk. So you would go from the inventory and then practice the 4 C's. So again, a really easy 2-step formula. So what we've talked about today, and I would love to hear in the chat box, those of you, like which areas you're going to work on, or which area you want to work on and start with. If it's the procrastination, if it's people pleasing, whichever came up for you. If you're not delegating enough in the workplace, like what area do you want to work on? So we can talk about those areas, but I'd love for everyone to include in the chat box. And just as a recap of everything that we've learned today. So we started with just educating ourselves on perfectionism. And then we moved into the 3-step process of awareness. Am I a slow perfectionist? Am I a fast perfectionist? Am I both? Then we learned tangible mindset tools to start easily shifting our mindset. And then we learned the 2-step formula for taking action, right? Inventory and detox. What I want to leave you all with before we do some Q&A is one of my favorite quotes. And it's one day or day one. Right? One day or day one. Are we going to make these changes one day? Or are we going to use this webinar to be our day one? Right? Do not let perfectionism keep you from everything that you deserve, because you are deserving of all of the success and the fulfillment and everything you want in your life. But perfectionism keeps us from that. So I invite you all to make today your day one. So I want to thank you all for your time today, and thank you all for participating in the chat. If anyone has questions, we can include them in the chat. You can unmute yourself. It can be on any and everything. It can be perfection related or not. But if you have any questions, I'll leave some space. Otherwise, that's what we've got today. And Darla, do you want to add anything?
Hey, thank you. Oh my gosh, I'm still taking notes. Hold a minute. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I was still taking notes on everything. So just when I've heard you share parts of this before, I started paying attention more to how often I say yes, because it's a bad habit. A lot of that comes out of the fact of just wanting to be everybody's friend, want to be helpful. And then I realized I've super overcommitted myself.
Right.
And then I realized there's the stress because I can't meet up with it. Then there's the stress of, oh my gosh, I've just let everybody down. I'm not, and then I go into a spiral. So thank you for giving us a moment to realize, okay, there is a bridge, and to giving us the action steps of the 4 C's, because there is a difference of saying, okay, I'm going from one thing and then stop doing it. That we can't do humanly, we can't do that. Yeah. So thank you so much for giving us those 4 C's to help us to know how to bridge from what we're doing incorrectly and is a challenge to how we can be better at that. So thank you so much. That's helped me a lot. And I did put into the chat for everyone Vitale's the website of how to get in her book, and would love for y'all to take a look at that, because it is going to be, I don't want to be dramatic and say life-changing, but it truly is, because it can help you get into better habits. And I'm also going to put into our chat the upcoming breakfast that we have of Leadership Breakfast. So y'all can take a look at that as too. Vitale, thank you so much. The chat, I will be saving the chat. Because this has just been amazing watching how everyone is not only engaged, but how you've affected us in such a positive way. Starting off 2023 with you has just been amazing. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, well, I feel really grateful. And if anyone wants to connect further, I'm on LinkedIn. If you have any other questions that you didn't feel comfortable talking about in front of the group, but you want to talk about one-on-one, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm available. And I want to thank you all so much. It's been an honor. And I can't wait to see what 2023 holds for all of us. So have an amazing rest of your day. And thank you, Darla. And thank you for everyone who attended.
Thank you so much. Thank y'all for being here.